Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, we are going to be having a conversation about the 30% US tariffs that are expected to kick in on the 1st of August. We'll speak to Toby Chance, who's with the Democratic Alliance, about what the plan is. And then also on the show, we speak to Dean Mcpherson about the investigation that he announced earlier today. He revealed that there have been some irregularities when it comes to that oxygen tender plant involving the IDT. So the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure speaks to us. And then later on, we'll speak to the SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter. And the question we're really asking is SARS keeping up with the rise of sophisticated tax scams and tax evaders as it prepares for the tax season? But first, my comment. All right, so the tariffs that the US has imposed are coming into effect on the 1st of August. And there are some concerns from some industries about whether or not there is a plan to cushion the industries that have been affected, but also whether or not there is a plan to have a conversation with the US officials to try and find a more favorable deal. You may have seen the citrus industry coming out and raising some concerns about the inevitable job losses that are expected should there, of course, not be a favorable deal. In fact, they've been asking that, how about we have that universal 10% on fresh produce exports somehow extended? But is that really the plan? The Department of Trade and Industry released a statement that I'll read for you earlier today. And they said in the statement that, and I quote here, South Africa took the decision not to retaliate to the reciprocal tariffs announced by the United States. We also want to reiterate that we have no intention of decoupling from the United States either. Our view is that our negotiations remain the best tool to deal with the issues that are on the table. And part of the deal that has, of course, been proposed by our Trade and Industry Department is that the agricultural market access, for instance, must be simplified, right? Simplifying of the U.S. poultry exports under the 2016 tariff rate quota and unlock approximately $91 million in trade. In addition, they talk about the readiness to open market access for blueberries subject to necessary protocols. Another deal that the Trade and Industry Department has made was that South African firms must commit to invest about $3.3 billion in U.S. industries such as mining, metals, recycling, while both governments agree to pursue joint investment in critical minerals, pharmaceutical, and of course, agri-machinery. And the question we've got to ask is whether this actually sounds like a sweet deal for the United States. I mean, is this a deal that the U.S. is going to look at and think, okay, let's rethink that 30% tariff, or maybe let's extend the 10% tariff on fresh produce? And that's really the question that we have. So how devastating is this 30% tariff that's expected to kick in on the 1st of August on our industry? Here is what the Department of Trade and Industry has said before.
As the President also indicated in his closeout interview during the BRICS summit, I think every country has a right to associate and affiliate with any grouping that it feels will advance its interests. And BRICS does not in any way aim to undermine U.S. interests. It's about a cooperation between emerging economies that are trying to advance their own interests in terms of ensuring that we boost amongst ourselves intra-BRICS trade and investments in ways that are mutually beneficial to BRICS countries, but not to anybody's detriment. So, of course, we will continue to engage with the U.S. in terms of what BRICS stands for, and that it is not intended in any way to really be anti-American, and it is not anti-American in any way.
And of course, what the DGG is responding to there is the fact that the US President Donald Trump has threatened that those who continue to align themselves with BRICS will face a 10% tariff. So in addition to the 30% tariff that we are already facing, Donald Trump is saying if you continue to align with BRICS, I'm going to throw a 10% tariff on that for your alignment with BRICS. Now, the question is, what plan does our government have to cushion the industries that are going to be most affected by this? What is the plan? Here's what the DGG said when we had her on the show.
We are looking at a possible package to assist the industries that are heavily vulnerable to these reciprocal tariffs. Secondly, as indicated in the President's statement, we are working with the industry to look at the diversification efforts. And there are markets that we have identified across the world, also leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is a new agreement that is available, relatively untapped, that we believe our industry can remain competitive in and would need to explore. But also we have a number of trade agreements across the world that the industry can leverage in terms of its own diversification efforts. But also there is work that the DTIC is undertaking with the industry in terms of support in shifting some of the vulnerable sectors from exports into the US, into various markets.
So how should our government be responding to these tariffs? President Donald Trump has already given us that ultimatum about being aligned to BRICS, but how should we respond? Do we retaliate with higher tariffs on US imports? Our government already says that's not a decision that they have taken. Do we cut our own tariffs on the US? What do we do? Well, Minister Gwede Mantashe has a suggestion.
The diplomatic discipline will engage the US, but it doesn't stop us from diversifying our markets. If the US imposes high tariffs, we must look for alternative markets. Our biggest trading partner is China. It's not the US. US is number 2. It means that if they impose heavy tariffs on us, we must look more for alternative markets in the world. They are there, they are available, we must exploit them.
So we surely need to find new markets for our exports. I mean, look at maybe the intercontinental free trade agreement, the BRICS bloc, what opportunities exist there. But the question then is, will Trump be happy with that when he has already threatened that 10% tariff if we continue to align ourselves with BRICS? But the Minister Gwede Mantashe, they're suggesting that we need to start exploring other markets. So the question we're asking you tonight is, do you agree with Gwede Mantashe that South Africa should seek these new mineral markets if the tariffs are imposed? Then wouldn't that elicit a response from the US, one that is perhaps more devastating? You can send us a WhatsApp voice note on 078-459-1897. Remember to tell us your name and your surname and where you're sending that voice note from. And please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @Face the Nation SABC. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. Let's stay on that story. The Democratic Alliance is urging the Trade and Industry Minister Park Stow to conclude a trade deal with the United States before tariffs decimate the country's economic growth. In a statement released today, the minister says South Africa remains committed to a conclusion of the US trade deal. Toby Chance is the DA spokesperson on trade, industry and competition, for joining us via video link. Toby, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Hi, thanks, Clement.
Do we actually have a plan in as far as negotiations are concerned? I mean, that deadline is fast approaching.
Well, according to the DTIC, there is a plan, but we haven't seen a lot of detail. And that's been one of the problems, is that the Department and Minister Tao have been quite reticent to give us many details. They released what they called a condition precedent document, which suggests that something is afoot. But with only 2 days to go, it's difficult to know exactly what is. I think the issue actually goes back to the fact that these discussions should have started many months ago, because when Trump was elected in November, his loving of tariffs as an economic instrument was plainly obvious. And I think that we needed to pick up the ball much sooner than we have, and we're now rushing to catch up.
And the question a lot of us have been asking is, who has been negotiating on our behalf in Washington, D.C.? I'm sure you've seen some concerns that seemingly have been raised about whether or not we have presence in Washington, D.C. or not, as these tariffs, come into effect on the 1st of August. I mean, from what you have seen, from what the Trade and Industry Department have said, do you think we've had strong presence on the ground and having some really serious negotiations here?
I think the answer must be no. I mean, we haven't had an ambassador since March. We supposedly had a trade envoy that never stepped foot in the United States. So those are two senior positions that haven't been filled. Obviously, we have an embassy in Washington and have had for many years, and they do have trade representatives there. But they're pretty obscure. They're anonymous. We don't know who they are. And so, the relationships that are at the basis of all international relations, including trade, have just simply not been there. And unfortunately, President Trump has had South Africa in his sights for some time now. He feels that we are backing the wrong horse globally in terms of our international relations. And in the American communications, they made it clear that it's not just tariffs that are the problem, it's the non-tariff barriers. In other words, it's South Africa's own domestic policies with regard to land and potential expropriation and potential exclusion of American companies from deals because of BEE. Those are the things that haven't actually been placed on the table by the South African negotiators. And I'm concerned that that absence of those issues has probably left us exposed to the tariffs imposed on the 1st of August.
Well, we'll see how far this deal that our government has proposed is going to go before the 1st of August, if indeed it will be quite appealing to the United States. Do we need a deal, not a deal, but a plan to cushion the blow? The citrus industry is already raising alarm bells that we are looking at inevitable job losses here if we're not going to extend this 10% universal tariff on fresh produce, or if we're not going to get some kind of a favorable deal. So do you think, as the Democratic Alliance, are you pushing for government to somehow have a plan to cushion especially the most affected industries?
We absolutely are. And obviously, Minister of Agriculture, John Steenhuisen, has been traveling the globe and doing his utmost to open up those markets. But of course, it's not something that can be done overnight. And as the Citrus Growers Association have said, they've got thousands of cartons of fruit sitting in the ports. And the importers have to hedge their bets. They're looking at Peru, they're looking at Chile, at other markets or other suppliers. And with a 30% tariff likely to be imposed on South African imports, whereas a 10% tariff will be imposed on imports from other countries, South Africa's exporters are looking very vulnerable. So we do have to diversify, there's no question about it. But also we have to bear in mind that many of our export markets have had particular fruit varieties developed for them. The American market, for example, has worked very closely with the citrus industry to develop types of citrus fruits that are appealing to the American consumer, which may not be appealing to other consumers. So again, this is a trade relationship that takes years to build and can quickly be destroyed. So I think it comes back again to building relationships, and those relationships have got to be re-established very, very quickly.
Gwede Mantashe suggests that South Africa should seek new mineral markets if these tariffs continue to be imposed. And I mean, you've got to wonder if that wouldn't elicit a response from the US that would be more devastating to us.
Yes, and I think we must understand that under the rules that are being imposed, many of those minerals are actually excluded. So chrome, manganese, coal, they're regarded as strategic minerals, so they don't attract the same tariffs. So for us to suddenly, close off those exports to America would actually be cutting our nose off to spite our face. That would be a very foolish move, in my view. What we have to be doing is we have to be looking at what does the American economy want to sell to us? Because as trade is a reciprocal relationship, what can we buy from America? And naturally, gas has come into the equation because we have a gas supply problem from Mozambique. That's definitely an opportunity. But then also investments need to be given more incentives in this country. What President Trump has been saying is he doesn't want to compete with South African companies. He wants to compete with Chinese and other companies that are doing business in South Africa and exporting to the world. He wants South Africa to have American companies investing in this country to export to the world. And we should be welcoming that opportunity, because part of diversification is working with any company that wants to invest directly in our economy. And bear in mind that what Mantashe was saying about exports, China may be our biggest export partner, but most of those are unrefined goods, minerals, whereas in America, they take many of our high value added goods, in particular cars and fruit, nuts, wines, and things like that, electronic equipment. So actually the value add from America's buying of our goods is much higher than Chinese. So it's not such an easy equation of saying, they're our biggest trading partner and America's number two, we can dump them. We absolutely can't.
Well, Toby Chance, spokesperson on trade, industry and competition for the Democratic Alliance, thank you so much for making time for us. After the break, we'll have that conversation with the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Dean Mcpherson. He announced the outcome of a forensic investigation that should concern all of us who are concerned about these state institutions. Stay with us here on Face the Nation. Welcome back. So we've been asking you this evening on Face the Nation about what, of course, we are expecting from the US. The tariffs are expected to come in on the 1st of August. And we've been asking you whether you think Minister Gwede Mantashe, who suggested that we should seek alternative markets for our critical mineral exports if the US tariffs are imposed. So let's look at some of the tweets that have come through so far. Amy says Mantashe has a point. Diversifying markets is smart business, especially with tariffs that are looming. Luke Presto often highlights how South Africa needs to play the long game with minerals. But let's be real, losing the US would still hurt. Mian says, no, it will make things just worse. The US, despite their tariffs, is a reliable partner. What we need is a trade deal. Not giving up and searching for other partners will make the situation worse. Mohale says, Mantashe's push for new markets and local mineral processing is smart given South Africa's mineral strength, but without the US diplomacy and faster industrial progress, it may remain just a good idea. And of course, we still don't know if we have someone negotiating on behalf of the South African government on the ground in Washington, D.C. We've been told Mcpherson Jonas is doing work behind the scenes, but you need someone in Washington, D.C., especially during such a crucial time where tariffs are about to come in. Here are some of the WhatsApp voice notes that have come through.
Clement, good evening. Clement, I agree with Minister Gwede Mantashe. It's high time we start looking at other markets. We can't be bullied by America. We've got other countries that are willing to trade with us. Let's explore those markets. And we must begin to use a different currency to start trading amongst ourselves. I think BRICS countries need to take a stance against America. It's high time we develop something else.
Sam Alkotrikopis Clement Dumela. I agree with Gwede Mantashe that we must go for alternative markets. The government must exhaust all the avenues before it succumbs to Trump's punishment. Options will always be there for as long as our country forms part of BRICS. One thing which must serve as a retaliation is to totally isolate US as BRICS until it comes to its senses. We cannot afford to be manipulated by Trump. Not now, not ever. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for all of your inputs and comments. Let's move to this now. Public Works and Infrastructure Minister Dean Mcpherson says he'll be writing to the Hawks to enforce disciplinary action following revelations of irregularities into that over 800 million rand hospital oxygen plant tender awarded by the Independent Development Trust. Macpherson briefed the media on the outcome of the final forensic investigation on alleged corruption involving IDT earlier today. The investigation revealed that IDT CEO Tebogo Malaka and other officials failed to follow proper procurement protocol. The minister joins us now in studio. Minister Mcpherson, thank you so much for making time. Good evening.
Good evening, Clemens. Nice to be with you.
So I want us to take a few steps back. What necessitated this investigation? What was picked up?
It was the revelations that were first published in the Daily Maverick that there were concerns around the awarding of a tender to a company, little-known company called Bulking, that didn't have a credible address. It was just an apartment in Johannesburg. Directors were not known. And most importantly, that they didn't have SAPRA accreditation to be able to construct and supply medical equipment, despite legislation requiring that and despite the original RFQ requiring that. And that's really what created a problem. From there, that then sparked concerns amongst the Global Fund, which was funding the project. It's not funded by South African taxpayers. Global Fund is contributed to by many countries and other donors. And so, when that concern was raised, we felt it important to get to the bottom of it, because what we didn't want to do is lose that funding in discussions with Minister Motsoaledi. And I'm glad that we took the decision that we did then, because we ensured that not a single rand of donor funds was paid over, and because the contract was suspended. And the result of that is now that the project will continue, but it's continuing under the DBSA by using those donor funds still.
Some of the things you're explaining sound to me like the most basic of things. If you're going to be dealing with a contract of this magnitude, how did that pass through the processes within government? Where was the CEO? Where was the board?
Well, the boards don't adjudicate tenders or don't get involved in the operational side of entities. Neither do I as the minister. That is the responsibility of the executive, and then the board is supposed to conduct its fiduciary duty and oversight duties to ensure that everything is done correctly. But it goes beyond just those issues. In fact, the SAPRA license was found to belong to someone else, and they didn't even know that their license was being used. Bulking was only entitled to be awarded up to 200 million rand. That was their grading by the Construction Industry Development Board, but they were awarded 550 million rand. So it's very clear that the absolute basics of procurement and the IDT's own supply chain management policies were not carried out and were not followed, and where those concerns were raised to turn back and to abandon the project, they continued to plow on.
Yeah, and I suppose what I mean by the board is because there have been reports that indicated that there's something wrong here. Did they do anything about it?
Well, you'll recall last year when I engaged the then board, I said, I have these concerns. I would like to see the documents. I would like to see the SAPRA licenses, the contracts, etc. And I was quite frankly at that point was given the runaround, partial information was given. The board at the time said there's no issue, we don't see any reason to intervene. And then only in December did they then say, actually, no, we do think that there is a problem. So
what made them change their minds?
Well, I think that they could see that the growing public anger at what was going on and the obviousness of the information that then started to come out made it an impossible decision to defend. And when I said, that the entity cannot investigate itself, that was, their answer to the problem, that they'll investigate. I said, under no circumstances can you investigate something that you're accused of doing, that we will do it and we will take it over. Then they said, okay, well, now we think that there may have been a problem to begin with, and we will seek to work with the Department of Health to suspend the tender. Yeah.
So the CEO, Tebogo Malaka, has been fingered in this report together with other officials. What happens next? And number one, what role did they play, and what happens to them next?
Well, of course, as the accounting officer, you take ultimate responsibility for how these things pan out. The report found that she was told that there were problems and issues. She didn't intervene. That there were officials put on the bid adjudication committees that should not have been there, despite it being very clear in terms of the memorandum of understanding between the Department of Health and the IDT. And of course, the absolutely appalling state of record keeping for all of these meetings. There were flimsy minutes and not a single electronic recording existed. It may exist, might not have been handed over to us, despite being repeatedly asked to do so. There are a number of violations in terms of supply chain management policy that we believe has been taken place, and it would be now up to the IDT board, who she is accountable and responsible to now take that process forward. So I met with them this afternoon before I briefed the media. I also briefed Minister Motsoaledi, as well, as he was a key stakeholder in this issue as well. And they have given me their commitment that they will look at it properly, thoroughly, and take the processes forward as they may be.
How much was budgeted for this project? Now we're speaking about this amount. Did it balloon at some point?
Absolutely. It started off at 216 million rand, it then went to 250 million rand, and it then jumped up to more than 800 million rand, of which 550 million rand was allocated to bulking. This is the same company that didn't qualify for more than 200 million rand. Just on their pricing alone, their pricing was 174% more than what was originally budgeted for. And that's, of course, just, people are sick and tired of seeing these escalations and, ballooning of costs, when it was very clear from the outset and from the original RFQ that that's what the maximum amount would be 216 million rand.
So from 200 and so million rand to about 800 million rand.
Absolutely, and what was worse is that they had actually convinced the Department of Health and the Global Fund to accept that, and that's why I'm so glad that we intervened when we did, despite, Clement, the most horrific attacks that people like myself and the chairperson of the IDT now sustained, people trying to make the most spurious of allegations against us, political parties waging war against us. And if we had backed down then and given in then, money from the Global Fund would have gone into the back pockets of these illegitimate companies, and we would have lost that project altogether, and there would be no hope of recovering it.
Yeah, part of that political fight is that there were suggestions being made that this is too political. It's because you want to appoint your own people at the IDT and you're not happy with the people that have been appointed by the previous minister.
That turned out to be completely false. The new board was roundly endorsed by Cabinet, completely and unanimously. We have some of the best and brightest minds there. My job is to make sure that entities work, that they deliver on their promises, that they are able to account for every single cent. And I suspect what happened is, at the time when people could see the moves that we were making to drive transparency and accountability, that didn't suit some people, and maybe some political parties who were on the back end of being asked to wage a war against me, to try and put me off or to try and stop me from investigating. But I took an oath to stop wrongdoing, not to protect it.
Yeah. Let's talk about this oxygen tender project, because I imagine these oxygen systems will still be needed ASAP. So if this project is going to continue, which institution is this procurement going to happen through now?
So Minister Motsoaledi and myself had extensive engagement on it, and I must really thank him. He's been a great support and pillar of strength to me in this process, because it straddles both of our departments, and we both wanted these oxygen plants to be delivered. So they withdrew the IDT from implementing the project. We safeguarded the donor funding from the Global Fund, and it's now the Development Bank of Southern Africa that will be implementing the project, which is a great shame, because actually the IDT, if they had done it properly, would have been able to make a management fee off of it, which is what their business model is, and been able to deliver a world-class project with the Global Fund, which might have led, to other projects that they could have done for communities across the country.
What are the chances that there are some politicians that stood to benefit from this? Did the forensic investigation look deeper into that?
So the forensic investigation said that there were no links between any officials and those in the companies. But let's be honest, no one puts a company in their name. So I take it at face value that that's what's is the case. I have no evidence to suggest otherwise. Obviously, it is now, the Hawks have been investigating it prior to our forensic report. They continue to do so. This report will now also buttress that investigation. I'm not entirely briefed about what they're investigating. I respect that they need the space to do so. But that may bring up other people or other issues and other leads.
All right, Dean Mcpherson, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thanks so much for having me, Clement.
That's the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. After the break, we speak to the SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter. Stay with us. Welcome back. As the 2025 tax season kicks off, the South African Revenue Service is sounding the alarm on a surge in sophisticated scams targeting taxpayers. SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter has warned citizens to be vigilant, highlighting the rise in fraudulent notices seeking sensitive information. Now, with the new tax filing season now underway, taxpayers are advised to be cautious and aware of these potential threats. The SARS Commissioner, Edward Kieswetter, joins us now in studio. Commissioner, thank you for making time. Good evening.
Clement, good evening, or good night, I should say.
Yeah, good night. It's a perfect way. How are taxpayers being targets of these tax crimes?
Well, for us, it is tax filing season. For many taxpayers, it is refund season. And so scamsters are well aware of the fact that many taxpayers have the expectation of getting a message from SARS, and the message invariably could be you owe us more money or we owe you money. And so there's a whole lot of messages on social media, WhatsApp, SMSs that pretends to be a message from SARS, but then lures people into clicking to a link that is a fraudulent site that then asks for information from taxpayers. Yeah. That's the most common way that, unfortunately, many taxpayers who are desperate for a refund then disclose personal details that can then be compromise their situation.
How are you dealing with that? Is it a matter of us as taxpayers being more vigilant? Is there anything that you can do on your side?
Well, definitely. I mean, with all the potential and convenience that comes with online transactional capability, whether it's to shop online or fulfill any other financial transaction online, also presents a risk. And the safest way, the most secure, is vigilance. We can do whatever we want, but we find that most of the profiles that have been compromised have invariably been a taxpayer that either drops their guard, is lured into a false sense of security, or even shares passwords or other. We have worked a lot to strengthen the authentication. We've introduced a two-factor authentication where we will, once you have logged on, we will send you, similar to the banks, a one-time PIN.
Yeah.
We've also introduced biometric authentication now, which is in the end the most secure way of identifying yourself, to strengthen the integrity of our systems. And touch wood, we've not really had any instance of fraud, but in the world where we live in, we can take no chances.
Yeah. What are you working well with law enforcement agencies? What's the collaboration looking like, especially when you look at what's happening, the activities in the illicit economy, smuggling, illegal transactions, illicit manufacturing, I can go on and on. Is there collaboration, and are you making any progress?
Well, first of all, we also collaborate with industry leaders, sectors in various sectors, whether it's the fuel industry, whether it's the tobacco industry. We have to work with industry. Again, ultimately, we work on the basis of voluntary compliance. And from the perspective of voluntary compliance, we need to create a virtuous system. And then, of course, in instances where there is fraud or crime, we have a significant reliance on enforcement agencies like the Hawks, the SIU, the South African Police Service, and ultimately the prosecuting authority on whom we rely to bring perpetrators to book.
Yeah. My understanding is that you have a target going forward to recover. Is it an additional 20 billion rand or 50 billion rand?
So let me just first, for a moment, if you don't mind, speak about tax filing season, because that's really a good news story for South Africans, and I'll come to the 20 billion that you refer to. So 3 weeks into filing season, we have already assessed 6.63 million taxpayers, paid out 17.7 billion of refunds, 89% or 90% of that paid in under 72 hours. That's mind-boggling if you think that 2 decades ago it would have taken 6 months and on average 50 days to pay out a refund. Within that, there is a sub-universe of 5.5 million taxpayers who would have had to do nothing. In other words, we did all the work for them using third-party data and AI, both AI to calculate the assessment and also fraud risk detection AI to prevent refunds. And so far this year, we've already prevented the outflow of 7 billion rand of impermissible or fraudulent refunds. I think it was important just to thank South Africans for their cooperation as far as that's concerned. We don't declare victory, but it's a significant story. Now, what that does, it advances our strategic intent for voluntary compliance. I said at a function earlier today, SARS does not seek to maximize revenue. It seeks to ensure that the revenue that is due to the state is collected. And to do that, we need to make the investment into our capability, such as I've just alluded to. One of the areas of focus this year is to recover debt that is already owed to the state, but for various reasons not disputed, but also not paid. And so the additional money that the minister gave unto SARS was to drive a focused debt recovery project, which, if we succeed, will, in addition to the normal growth of our debt that we recover every year, we have made a commitment to yield at least another 20 billion of additional revenue from that effort.
And what's going to be your focus areas as you try and recover there? Are you looking at international tax evasions? Are you combating VAT fraud, other tax-related crimes?
It's everything. There's no single area. So let me just say that in personal income taxes, with normal taxpayers, standard income earners, we find the lowest risk. And obviously there is always the risk of fraudulent access to refunds. The highest area of abuse is VAT, where people either create companies, often shelf companies with no intention to trade, but to claim refunds. We've done a significant amount of work using data and AI to detect such fraud. Last year, we announced a withholding of just over 100 billion rand of additional revenue that would have flowed out as a refund, and the most significant component of that would be fraudulent refunds. Then there's other areas of fraud and abuse. In trade, it's what we call either trade-based money laundering, where companies who bring goods in try to undervalue or misprice the goods to save on customs duty and on VAT. And on goods that are locally manufactured then exported, companies try to overstate the value so they can maximize the refund on the VAT refund claim. So imports and exports presents a huge risk for us. And then, of course, there's just the blatant crime where trade flows are used for money laundering and illicit financial flows.
How are you encouraging taxpayers to be compliant this tax season? I mean, we often talk about the trust that exists between government and even an institution like trust and taxpayers. How important is it? Because sometimes South Africans see some of the things happening in a government, and that erodes, of course, the trust and the confidence that they have.
Let me just say that the work we have done over the last 6 years have brought about a significant improvement in trust. In 2019, by independent surveys, the trust level in SARS was 48%. Earlier this year, when we measured it, was at 78%. So, an inordinate 30 percentage points improvement in trust. How does that come about? It comes about because we genuinely do not seek to catch out taxpayers. We have three strategic objectives. The first being to help taxpayers understand their obligations. Secondly, to make it easy for them to fulfill that obligation. And this year, more than 60% of income earners would have had absolute ease. And then thirdly, to present a credible threat of detection. In the same period, we have seen the attitude of South Africans towards tax compliance improve by 11 percentage points from 66 to 77%. So these are significant improvements, but it has come about because of working hard not to, so we make this message very clear. Our primary objective is not to enforce. Our primary objective is based on the theory that most people are honest, and therefore if we help them to fulfill their obligations, they are more likely to comply. But then, of course, at the same time, we have to present a credible threat of detection so that those who do seek to defraud the fiscus must know that they do so with risk to themselves.
But I would argue you need government to also assist you here, because if South Africans see corruption in government, they see that the tax that they pay actually goes into benefiting politicians who are thieves and criminals, that doesn't encourage them to continue.
Absolutely, and government has a few responsibilities. The first is government must invest in SARS to make sure that SARS is adequately resourced to fulfill its important mandate. The reliance of the state is 90% of its revenue comes from SARS, and therefore we continue to make this plea to Parliament, to the Minister, so that SARS is adequately funded. We've seen this year a lot of public outcry in support of that, supporting SARS. So that's the first investment by government. The second then is the quality of spending. No South African wants to see their hard-earned tax money be wasted or be stolen. And until levels of corruption and levels of wastage are significantly confronted and dealt with, South Africans amongst them may feel morally justified to fiddle with their own taxes. And so we make a clear message to our colleagues in government that expenditure matters because it is directly correlated to tax compliance. And then the third area that government has to help is consequence management across the criminal justice system. Because if South Africans do not see that those who break the law, who flaunt their wealth have unexplained wealth and get away with it, if they do not end up in the criminal justice system and successfully prosecuted, again, it weakens the integrity of the system. We have to do a whole lot of things as the whole of government. We can't operate in silos. So some of the things that we are doing, for example, with Home Affairs and the BMA, is to look at strengthening the visa system, the border management system, by working with SARS, forming a more integral system, because a border is one post, even though there are multiple agencies there. Another area is the South African Reserve Bank is leading the work in terms of building an instant payment system, and from the lessons we've learned, can significantly improve financial inclusion and reduce the amount of cash that circulates in the system, and that improves the integrity. And then across the whole of government, we need to work towards a single, unique digital identity. At the moment, the suggestion is that for every South African South African individual on the population register, there are at least 7 digital identities for each of us. So you have an ID number, you have a passport number, you have a bank number, you have a hospital number. There's no need to have multiple numbers. And as the systems are digitized, you exist as a digital identity. The aim should be to consolidate all of our various identity, starting with anywhere where you consume a government service or is a beneficiary of a government grant, that you should only have one identity. Because that will also minimize the arbitrage opportunity to get an income and a social grant, to be not tax compliant and get a contract with government. If you have one identity, you pop up as the same version of yourself anywhere in government.
It's easy to pick up. Just lastly, Commissioner, Bane and Co announced that it's going to be winding down its business in South Africa. I mean, this is a company that acknowledged making serious mistakes at SARS. This is 3 years after it was banned from government contracts. How important do you think that is, especially when we talk about this aspect of accountability, especially on companies like Bane and Co, which did such devastating impact on SARS?
Let me first say, I mean, to the Baines and all of the other companies, we have no explicit intention to undermine them or to snuff them out of doing business. In fact, we need more businesses in South Africa, not fewer businesses. However, companies like Bain should not play games. We expected more of them to make full disclosure rather than a vague public apology about what they did wrong. There was a clear process during the Nugent Commission, but even beyond the Nugent Commission, we continue to engage with entities and invited them to take us into confidence and to really say, what are you asking for forgiveness for? What are you apologizing for? Help us to identify those South Africans or foreigners who became complicit or compliant so that we can hold them to book and in that way earn your redemption. And we hope that companies like Bain will go through their own catharsis like other companies have had to, because we need South Africa to be a vibrant destination for both domestic but also foreign businesses to thrive in South Africa.
Yeah, Commissioner, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to wrap up now with some of your tweets that came through, responding to the question we asked at the top of the show about Minister Gwede Mantashe's suggestions around looking at alternative markets for our critical mineral exports if the US tariffs are imposed. So let's look at some of the tweets that have come through. Rabotata says, I fully agree with Gwede Mantashe. BRICS and other countries besides the USA can form a formidable market. Economy is a two-way process. So in the long run, the US industries will ultimately suffer as they will have shortage of minerals. Bono says, I agree, the US is not the only country that is market friendly for South Africa to trade with. We need to look for other alternatives. Rise says it's disheartening to hear the government talking about diversifying exports now with the looming USA tariffs when they should have done so when talks of kicking South Africa out of AGOA started years ago. Last minute trade deals are risky. Let's hope South Africa's plans doesn't further the enslavement. Well, we'll have more information about that before the 1st of August. I imagine there'll probably be a press briefing by the Trade and Industry Minister charting the way forward, especially if there's no deal that's going to be reached before the 1st of August. Thank you so much for all of your inputs, your tweets, your voice notes as well. And thanks for watching the Tuesday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back with you on Thursday at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.